Facebook so that if people want to find it, yeah, YouTube is more reliable. There's just all sorts of problems going to Facebook Live.
Get it?
Yeah, then I'm going to put the link from YouTube on Facebook so that if people want to find it. Yeah, YouTube is more reliable. There we go.
It's recording.
Muted the sound on that. Let me get the link here. Copy video URL.
Are we going to do Havdalah as part of the service tonight?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I just don't know why randomly it won't work, but oh well. Okay, so
in this day and age with everything going on, we have to be flexible.
Yeah, I mean there is chat, so I can check the chat on YouTube also, but so it is what it is. Let's see if I can get this to shrink a little bit, but I can see the chat. Okay. Now I can actually see the chat on YouTube while I'm doing this. So there you go. Okay. Shabbat Shalom.
Shabbat Shalom.
And we should be up and going today. So we're gonna, the next couple Saturday mornings are going to be interesting. Not only is today Slichot, which means kind of we're still doing a normal thing this morning, but next Saturday is Rosh Hashanah. The Saturday morning after that is Shabbat Shuvah, and we're going to study Jonah. And then the Shabbat morning after that is the
Sukkot.
Is Sukkot. Yeah, I mean, so we're kind of in the middle of some interesting, and then after that is Simchat Torah, and potentially we're reading the Simchat Torah portions that morning. So I think that's the plan. So we have all of that going on all of these Saturday mornings as we move forward through this time. So let's see here. Where are we? Oops, not the wrong book. Got to pick up the Torah commentary and not
the prayer book,
and not the prayer book for the Torah study. Okay, so we're in Deuteronomy 29, Nitzavim.
Shall we start at the beginning?
We can, yeah, absolutely. 29:9 is where we are.
Okay, should I go?
Yeah.
You stand this day, all of you, before the eternal your God, your tribal leaders, your elders, and your officials, all the men of Israel, your children, your wives, even the stranger within your camp, from the woodchopper to the water drawer, to enter into covenant with the eternal your God, which the eternal your God is concluding with you this day, with its sanctions, to the end that God may establish you this day as God's people, and be your God, as God promised you, and as God swore to your ancestors, Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. I make this covenant with its sanctions, not with you alone, but with those who are standing here with us this day before the eternal your God, and with those who are not yet with us here this day.
Okay.
So who's the you? At the very beginning.
Well, that's the thing. I think this is not even just Israelites. I think it's addressing everybody, right? It's because it's addressing all of the people of Israel, but then it's addressing the stranger within the camp and all these other people as well. So, in other words, anybody who essentially wants to be with you in your midst is possible to to be in this to be included here.
Because it also says even the stranger within your camp. So
Yeah,
that,
I mean, that's what I'm saying. I mean, if the stranger is included, then this is not speaking just to Israelites. This is, the concept in ancient times was God of the place,
right.
right? So this was the people who were in the place is essentially what this agreement is with. And um,
But isn't the story of Jacob's dream an attempt to say that God isn't only the God of a place? You've traveled, but God is still with you.
well, I mean, so there are different ways of looking at this. One, you can make the argument that God is everywhere. Okay. The other argument is that God is only in specific places. So I think that the story of Jacob is really. Whoops, I forget that I don't have a touch screen. One thing that's different is I don't have a touch screen, so then I have to do this. Have to make sure that I'm doing these button things differently. Okay. So one thing is, the story of Bethel, I think, is a story about Bethel, and it's a story that God is saying essentially that God is specifically in Bethel, and that if you want to reach God, Bethel is a good place to do it, meaning that you can't just go anywhere and reach God.
So it would be a later interpretation or a later spiritual interpretation to take that the God was in this place and I did not know it. The idea that God traveled with Jacob and wasn't limited to one
Yeah,
place.
I think the original story is very much not a universal story that the way that we tend to read it. So, we like to say God is everywhere. I think the purpose that of the Bethel story is literally that Jacob realized that God was under the rock in the rock even that he was sleeping on. I mean, I think it could be that specific, that the rock that Jacob was sleeping on is in the Holy of Holies in the sanctuary in Bethel, because that rock is where the connection is. And I think that the Jewish tradition has this long-standing view that this is true, that God is in the temple in Jerusalem, but God isn't even just on the Temple Mount in Jerusalem. God is in the Holy of Holies in Jerusalem, and God is on this specific spot in the Holy of Holies in Jerusalem. That's different than the Hasidic interpretation that God is in everything.
Okay.
Right? So we have these two different ways of looking at the presence of God in our tradition. And I think that the narrative we've got here in this Torah portion is about God of the place. So this is the covenant made with the people who are standing in this place in front of God. So where the later rabbis say God made this with everybody, this text specifically says these people here, but it includes everybody. I mean, it's including the stranger and everybody else who's there, but it's just the people there. And then it says,
The people who aren't here.
it goes beyond that, because it adds, I make this covenant not with you alone, but with those who are standing here with this day and those who are not here with us this day, right? So now we do have a universal. So it's possible that this passage is intended to move beyond that place thing. That you're not dealing with God of the place anymore. And it would make sense for that to be true, because the perspective of the Jews at that point, especially the Judahite tradition, when you get into the 5th century BCE, you are now dealing with Jewish communities that are spread all over the place. You have Jews in Babylonia, you have Jews in Egypt, you probably have Jews in other places. They're not quite as spread out as they're going to be in another couple hundred years when we hit Alexander. But they're pretty spread out. And it's possible that that this is intended to say what we do is for everybody. We're no longer in this God of the country, God of the land stuff. This is now the God of the people. And the people can be anywhere. And
And
it
any
also,
occupation.
what?
And any occupation, no class issue here.
Yeah, I mean, and it also implies that if God can reach you wherever you are, you can reach God wherever you are. Right? I mean, it's implied, which is interesting. Um, it's not implied strongly because I think they didn't want to make the argument. I think they wanted to make the argument that God can reach you, but not necessarily that you can reach God. But that's different.
Because
They
then you
want you
wouldn't
to
need
go to the
priest.
temple in Jerusalem.
Right.
Um,
Jody, just for your information, we're on Deuteronomy 29, verse 9 to 14 is what we're discussing.
yeah, the beginning of Nitzavim is where we are. Okay.
But there's also not a time limit. You know, I mean, we read it as future generations, that the covenant is with us too, the not here with us today. So
Yeah, I mean, and I think we want to do that. I don't know if that's intended in the text, but it's certainly not a stretch, right? I mean, I think the tradition, the Torah would generally describe future generations, or with your generation and generation after generation, or it would talk about your children or something like that. And it doesn't make that reference here. So I think the basic understanding is place rather than time. But I think the tradition would also understand that children and grandchildren and descendants forever are obligated based on what their parents do, which in later generations we stopped believing. So that's a whole different issue. You know, because I think that the intent of this text would be to say that if I swear an oath, my descendants for the rest of existence are obligated. That I think that the time the Torah is writing this, the time this text is written, the belief is that you can be obligated based on the oaths of your ancestors, which is why the Jewish people can be punished for something that of an oath that was broken because made by somebody 100, 200, 300 years earlier. So the assumption in this text is, if I make the oath, we don't need to worry about time because my descendants are always going to be obligated.
I'm just looking at some of the interpretations on this, where Rashi interprets it as the generations yet to be. Ibn Ezra says, but will follow after us. It is not, as some say, that those who were to come later were there in spirit. And Abravanel says it's to converts.
So, yeah, I mean, I think there are definitely different ways of looking at this. You can also say that you can look at this as who it's eliminating. If it's talking about future generations, then it's only referencing the people who were there and then their future generations. That's a problem. You know, they're in that spot. Whereas, like I said, I think the authors of this text were looking at a Jewish world where the Jews were scattered. Mm-hmm. And it wouldn't make sense to say that something that's obligated upon the people who are living in Judea is not obligated upon the Jews who are living in Babylonia, right? So I think what they wanted to say is that, you know, you can be obligated across space. You could make the point, however, that if all the Jews were together in one spot, then having it over time obligates everybody. But then it does cause a problem for Jews by choice, because if they weren't there, then they can't be obligated.
Well, And apparently Ibn Ezra doesn't like the wisecrack of, have we met before? Yeah, I think we were both at Sinai.
Yeah, I mean, so then there's the all Jewish souls were at Sinai issue,
Right.
which allows you to say this is referring to all Jewish souls, and therefore it's, the time is the issue. Um,
But Ibn Ezra
so
doesn't like that.
yeah, the interpretation I've got here just says that is future generations. I mean, it doesn't even quote which rabbis it's talking about. Um, but I think it actually is referring to I guess part of it is that in the context of this text it can't be referring to Jews who are living somewhere else, right? Because there are no Jews living anywhere else. They're all in the wilderness together. Um, but I think in the context of when it was written, that it's probably essentially arguing that what the high priest says in Jerusalem is obligated upon Jews wherever they are. So, so it probably is intended as both rather than either or. No, I don't know. We don't really have um, a way to figure that out. Um, I mean, it does talk about passing through the midst of other nations. I mean, maybe there's an assumption that some people were left behind and are in the midst of other nations. I don't know, but I don't think so.
Yeah.
Okay, you want to keep going?
Jody, do you want to pick it up at verse 15?
You got to turn your microphone on. We can't hear you.
Okay. Well, you know that we dwelt in the land of Egypt and that we passed through the midst of various other nations through which you passed. And you have seen the detestable things and the fetishes of wood and stone, silver and gold that they keep. Perchance there is among you some man or woman or some clan or tribe whose heart is even now turning away from the Lord our God to go and worship the gods of those nations. Perchance there is among you a stock sprouting poison weed and wormwood. When such a one hears the words of these sanctions, he may fancy himself immune, thinking, I shall be safe, though I follow my own willful heart, to the utter ruin of moist and dry alike. The Lord will never forgive him. Rather, will the Lord's anger and passion rage against that man till every sanction recorded in this book comes down upon him, and the Lord blots out his name from under heaven.
Okay.
They really don't want people dissenting.
Yeah.
Well, and the other thing, not only that, but it's interesting in that this is individual. Because up until this point, if an individual does something, it affects the entire people. And now we have kind of an explanation that would imply that if I do something detestable, that it's only going to affect me. Right? I mean, that when such one hears these sanctions, he may fancy himself immune, thinking, I shall be safe. The Lord will never forgive him. Adonai will never forgive him. Rather, the Lord's anger and passion will rage against that man. Right? So this is not God's going to be mad at you for allowing that person to do that. And God's going to have passion raging against that person. I mean, this throws the whole narrative of Pinchas, for example, out the window, right? We've got the whole narrative of Pinchas, where Pinchas goes and kills these people because the act that they're doing and worshiping worshiping other gods is causing plague to come down on the entire people and resulting in thousands of deaths and all this kind of stuff. And this text is basically saying, well, if they did that, I'd just be angry at them.
Well, but if you want the whole community being disciplined in following things, you also need individual responsibility and not just communal responsibility, because one can hide within the community.
Well, I get that. I'm just saying, I think Deuteronomy tries to change the idea that God punishes the entire people for the sins of individuals. And I think it became necessary to do that. I don't think it was, I don't think this was necessarily just a general philosophical change. I think when people returned from Babylonia, everybody could see that there were people who were doing things differently. Not everybody was doing the same thing in line, and it gets worse when you get into the Greek and Roman period, and Hellenistic and Roman period. So because of that, you can't possibly have a situation in which the acts of one person that are problematic all of a sudden cause the people to be cursed, because otherwise the people would need to be cursed all the time. Everybody could constantly see that this person who's married to a foreigner, is bringing curse upon us. This person who's, this visitor from such and such a place who's got an idol with them is bringing curse upon the whole people. And this merchant who's, coming through the land is going to bring curse on the whole people. And you could go on and on and on with a long list of these. If each one of them causes the entire people to be cursed. On the other hand, if it only causes that person to be cursed, then you just tell that person, okay, if you don't change your ways, you're going to be cursed. And the person says, okay, thanks for the information. I'll see you next week. Right? I mean, there's a lot more shalom bayit.
The way I react to Christian evangelicals who want me to,
it's fairly clear that the idea that you can't tolerate any dissent among your people is going to cause a lot of problems. And if you just say that individual is going to suffer consequences, then everybody else can just go their own way. And that's a big change in Deuteronomy. It's not, I don't think the rabbis stress it so much because the rabbis can't tolerate that level of change in the text. The rabbis can't have, what was true in the time of Pinchas is different in the time of Deuteronomy, right? It just doesn't work. They can't have God in the same revelation go from punishing everybody based on the sin of an individual to only punishing the individual for their own sin. But that's what the text does.
But the blessings
Deuteronomy does.
But the blessings and curses still seem, I mean, there's still the communal responsibility. I guess that's if the leadership or widespread wrongdoing as opposed to an individual wrongdoing.
I think it gets actually closer to how we look at the Book of Life in the High Holy Day tradition, where there's a ledger and you have a certain number of good deeds and a certain number of bad deeds. And as long as you're on the good side, as long as the weight of the good deeds is more, you're okay. Mm-hmm. I think that's what happens at this point. There are some good things about Deuteronomy. Deuteronomy bothers me generally, but this is one of the improvements of Deuteronomy, is moving from collective punishment to individual punishment, collective blessing to individual blessing. At the end of this, we still do have the blessing of the Jewish people entirely, but I think also that the blessings ultimately have something to do with the priests. So when you get to this and you see, as long as the priests are doing okay, everybody else is probably going to be okay too. But if you've got, like I said earlier on in the text, if one person is doing something bad, the entire people are punished. Mm-hmm. And the punishments are massive. It's, all sorts of innocent people who are dying. You know, you have children dying because somebody didn't give a thing that they took in battle to the temple, right? Right. Somebody else's children are dying because of that. That's a whole, that's way different than what we're talking about in this text.
And is it, I'm just trying to remember, the tradition is that the first temple was destroyed because of the sins of the people, and the second temple was destroyed because of the strife
No.
between the people.
Yeah, I mean, Sinat Hinam is kind of there was just so much hatred that they hated everything about each other, right? And there's no way to interact. I um, you could almost say Sinat Hinam is kind of the absence of love of your fellow, is what I would say. It's abject hatred or irrational hatred, where you don't like other people just because they're other people. You know, and we have you know, tendency to do that in the modern world too. You know, human beings have the tendency to do that, hate the other just because they're other. Um, I think the first temple is essentially destroyed because of polytheism. I mean, that's the argument. Although it's a problem because when you get to the time after the destruction of the northern kingdom, they're still, you know, then they're monolatrists, but the people really aren't. The leadership is monolatrist, the people really aren't. And then after the Babylonian exile of the leadership, everybody seems to become more monotheist. And I say more monotheist because I don't think the people are monotheist for a long time after that. And frankly, I don't think the people really ever become monotheist all the way down until the Christian period. I mean, it's a long, the whole Greco-Roman period, there's no reason to be monotheist because they're not monotheists. So it's not like there's pressure to be monotheists. But I do think the leadership was.
And the archaeology shows that even in the late second temple period, people had house gods.
Well, or they,
gods
you know,
in their houses,
we don't know. I mean,
or idols,
well,
or something.
it could be that they just had art. You know, we don't know, we don't understand what art looked like. But if most of what you have as art are idols, you know, it could well be that they say, no, I don't believe it. I just like what it looks like. You know, I mean, who knows? We don't know what they believe.
And the mezuzah is a replacement for that. So we don't have an indoor at our doorway house god, but we have the mezuzah on our doorpost to keep us safe.
Yeah, I mean, and for sure, we were a people who you know, liked fetishes and liked you know, liked having you know, all sorts of amulets and other things around. You know, that's a long history of our people. Everybody had those things.
Yeah.
Okay. Anyway, keep going, Jody.
The Lord will single them out from all the tribes of Israel for misfortune, in accordance with all the sanctions of the covenant recorded in this book of teaching. And later generations will ask, the children who succeed you, and foreigners who come from distant lands and see the plagues and diseases that Adonai has inflicted upon that land, and all its soil devastated by sulfur and salt, beyond sowing and producing, no grass growing in it, just like the upheaval of Sodom and Gomorrah, Admar and Zeboim, which the Adonai overthrew in his fierce anger. All nations will ask, why did the Lord do thus to this land?
Okay,
Wherefore,
so this is an interesting thing here, real quick. So we have gone in one sentence from we're going to punish individuals to now we're punishing the whole land again, right?
Yeah.
So in my mind, what's going on here is there's a later editor who's coming in here and writing in the margin, yeah, but Okay, so in other words, the original text says the Lord will single them out from all the tribes of Israel from misfortune in accordance with all the sanctions in this book of teaching, meaning this individual from the tribe, not even the tribe, the individual from the tribe is going to be punished. Okay, then the next line is the whole nation of Israel is going to be punished. That doesn't make any sense at all in context. It has to be a different perspective. Somebody is writing a note in the text saying, this is what, this is really what's going to happen. And we have these places, I think, throughout our text, throughout the Torah, where we have one narrative that's going on, and then somebody else is writing somewhere next to it, either quotes from some other passage just to say, here's the other perspective that we should talk about, or they're writing in, yeah, but, and trying to make the argument that the truth really is the exact opposite of what this text says. So we end up with both perspectives in this one spot. We have both the individual is going to be punished and not everybody else, and then we have the perspective that everybody's going to be punished because of what the individual did.
You also have the explanation of why the Dead Sea is the way the Dead Sea is, because it's Sodom and Gomorrah.
Yeah, I mean, well, and also, look, the Romans also had a later practice of salting things. That was a practice. If you wanted to destroy a place, you came in and you salted their land so the crops didn't grow. So, I mean, it was a practice to do that. They didn't have the ability to alter that. So, okay. Finish that up, Jody.
Why did the Lord do thus to this land? Wherefore that awful wrath? You want me to go on?
Yeah, keep going.
They will be told, because they forsook the covenant that Adonai, God of our fathers, made with them when he freed them from the land of Egypt. They turned to the service of other gods and worshiped them, gods whom they had not experienced and whom he had not allotted to them. So the Adonai was incensed at that land and brought upon it all the curses recorded in this book. Adonai uprooted from their soil in anger, fury, and great wrath, and cast them into another land, as is still the case.
Okay, so I think this is a quote from another place that's put in here, basically saying, here's, and this is the earlier text. This text that God is punishing the whole people and uprooting from their land and going to destroy everything, that's an earlier text of warning that if you don't do this, God's going to do this to everybody. So we're looking at different perspectives on punishment. This is called theodicy. We're looking at different perspectives on theodicy in this text, from I'm only going to punish the individual for what you did to I'm going to punish the whole people and everybody's going to suffer.
Here we also move from the individual wrongdoing to communal wrongdoing, because it's not the one man did it, but it's they turned to the service of the other.
Yeah, and if you look at the earlier stuff, Sally, you've got this perspective that that's always how it is. If one individual does something, it is they. So one individual violating becomes the people violated it. And that's what I was saying is that the time of Deuteronomy, that doesn't make any sense, because they can look around and see all sorts of people doing different things. And there's no way they can get along if every one of those people could cause them all to suffer so badly. So they can't have that be their perspective. But at an earlier time, I guess, when they were eliminating all the foreign influences around them, it was okay. In the time of Ezra, this text makes some sense, because that's what Ezra wanted to argue, is that all the foreign influences had to be gotten rid of. It's a problem. But when you're dealing with the time period slightly before that, and then the time period of the Greeks and Romans, you can't possibly have a thing where anybody who does anything differently is going to result in the calamity upon the whole people. That it just doesn't work.
But but to a still earlier time, like an earlier draft or whatever, still with, let's say, some of it coming from Josiah, it's also looking at what happened to the Northern Kingdom and trying to explain why. Because when you look at the curses, it feels like somebody saw a horrible war zone and is describing what occurred.
Yeah, I
And
mean, and they've seen, I tend to think that virtually anybody who went to war saw some of this,
yeah,
what they just saw it on a smaller scale. And I'm not even sure what the destruction of the North actually looked like, because my bet is that the Assyrians came in such force that most people simply were gone. They didn't fight. The land wasn't destroyed. The people were simply taken out of the land and put somewhere else. Um, Certainly some cities. I mean, if a city resisted, that's a different story. But um, most of the battles in ancient times where overwhelming army comes, everybody is either killed or they leave. Um, the army just takes over everything and keeps going. It's not, you don't have, the worst destruction is when you have a siege.
so maybe it's the attack of Assyria on the Southern Kingdom, which did
So
fight
it
back.
could
And
be the siege, it could be the siege of Jerusalem, or it could be specific cities. I mean, it could be that, the examples,
yeah,
right? The examples that are made of certain towns in order to show everybody else what it would be. And they did do that. I mean, for sure, part of how big armies got everybody else to surrender is that they did horrible things to one small place, to demonstrate what they would do if they got into the bigger place. And they generally did that to places that had fewer resources that they didn't care as much about, because the places they wanted everything intact, they didn't want to do that to.
mhm.
Um, I mean, that's just a standard. It's been a standard military tactic for forever. Um, and
Including Hiroshima and Nagasaki.
yeah, well, yeah. I mean, you that's the standard military tactic, and it is a lot better than the people who aren't who are who everybody believes they can stand up to and fight, and then you have the really the worst stuff is when you really do have the close battles that cause everybody to be involved and everything to be destroyed. Um, Okay.
Now we go back to the individual
Yeah. I mean, now
in verse 28.
I'm not entirely sure if this is individual or group. I mean, it could be both. It could be both, to be honest. But it certainly applies to the leaders here. But go ahead.
Concealed acts concern the Lord our God, but with overt acts, it is up for us and our children ever to apply all the provisions of this teaching.
Okay.
So if
So
we know somebody's doing something, we have to act to enforce. But it's acknowledging that there are some things we won't know because people are just doing it, hiding it.
yeah, I mean,
And
and certainly worshiping, household gods or ancestors or something like that in their home is going to be pretty difficult. Um, you know, you can look at the conspiratorial nature of a society pretty easily by how you look at this stuff. If you believe that an individual's action done in private can result in the cursing of the entire people and destruction on the entire people, that is going to be a very conspiratorial society, because that means that everybody is going to be poking into everybody else's business, looking to see, what could possibly be causing whatever problems we're facing right now. Right. I mean, that's just constant monitoring of everybody. Um, Whereas if you are in a society in which an individual's actions only affect the individual, then nobody cares what's going on behind closed doors, because what's going on behind those doors doesn't affect me. It doesn't matter. So I mean, and I mean, you can look at this right now, right? This argument pervades politics forever. I mean, it's part of our politics. You know, what you do behind closed doors, does it matter to me or not? Does it matter to our society or not? That's, I think, what's being said here. If the punishment for something that an individual does will impact everybody else, then you have to be concerned what's going on behind closed doors. You have to, because if that person is doing something that upsets God, God's going to punish you, not just them. But in a society in which only that person is getting punished, you don't care. So it becomes that perspective, and I think the Jewish people have moved on that scale back and forth from time to time. That perspective definitely impacts how everybody gets along. You know, we've lived among populations at different times that have been less tolerant of what other people are doing. And you know, because we've been a minority population, very often it's, what are the Jews doing that's bringing misfortune upon our people, right? I mean, that's the whole Nazi campaign was, the Jews are bringing us misfortune, right? I mean, that was the idea. And we saw that in various Christian societies. We saw that during the plagues in the 14th century. The Jews are doing something that is causing plague to come to us. So Jews have always been threatened by this communal punishment idea. It's never been good for us. Anytime we're in a position in which what an individual does is seen as resulting in calamity upon everybody else, Jews and other minority populations, not just Jews, other minority populations too, are all in danger. It's not a good scenario for people to be in. When you're in a society that's confident enough that the actions of individuals are not going to bring about calamity, it's much healthier. And I think we have both of those perspectives in this text. It's not that it's one or the other; they're both here. And I think it's been problematic for you know, when Jews have been in control of their own countries historically, or at least prior to the state of Israel. I don't think this is so much the state of Israel, but certain communities it is. I mean, in Israel, you know, the Haredi community actually feels this way. It is definitely a perspective of the Haredi community, and it's definitely a perspective in a lot of fundamentalist religious circles, no matter what religion you're talking about around the world. Any group that believes that adherence, you know, strict adherence to proper practice and belief is important for blessings, for communal blessings, is going to have a problem when you have dissent and different practices. So, okay.
To the positives.
Yeah. So now 30. What? What did you say, Sally?
I didn't say anything, no.
Okay, yeah. So I can read a little bit here, and then we have a few minutes before we have to get ready for service. When all these things befall you, the blessing and the curse that I have set before you, and you take them to heart amidst the various nations to which Adonai your God has banished you, right? There's the perspective of exile. And you return to Adonai your God, and you and children heed God's command with all your heart and soul, just as I enjoin upon you this day. Then Adonai your God will restore your fortunes and take you back in love. God will bring you together again from all the peoples where Adonai your God has scattered you. Even if your outcasts are at the ends of the world, from there Adonai your God will gather you. From there God will fetch you. And Adonai your God bring you to the land of your fathers, that your fathers possessed, and you shall possess it, and God will make you more prosperous and more numerous than your fathers. Okay, so this is exile and regathering. There are a lot of there are people who will look at this and say this is the story of Israel. There are people who will look at this and say this was the narrative after the destruction of the northern kingdom and the Babylonian exile, and the people came back, and here we are, we're doing better.
So this
And
also includes the secret Jews from
yeah, I mean, so
Spain.
this would include, this would really include anybody um, who has who is supposed to be part of the people, right? So this goes along with the anybody who's a Jew by choice has got a Jewish soul, right? Because if everybody's got a Jewish soul, then you never really left. You're really still part of the people. You're just off somewhere else. And
Yeah, 'cause those Jews were forced to convert or leave or go into hiding.
yeah, I mean, I think that you could definitely, it definitely applies to that. I think, the simplest argument here is that it applies to the Jews the people who were in Babylonia and Egypt and places in between. But as I said, when Alexander comes through, this gets more and more obvious, right? Because when Alexander the Great goes through, instead of having significant Jewish populations in a couple of other places, we now have Jewish populations everywhere. Jews are all over the Alexandrian Empire within a decade.
But they were older too. I mean, Mykonos, there's a synagogue in Mykonos that I think is way before Alexander.
I don't know. I mean, Alexander is 330 BCE, but I mean, you probably had Jews scattered. At my guess is significant populations of Israelites were scattered, after the destruction of the north, because as I said, if you have a major army coming, most people are simply going to flee, and they are not going to stop running until they can. So, yes, they may get on a boat and just go find an island somewhere. They may keep going into Egypt and then keep going past Egypt across North Africa. We don't really know what's going on with Jewish communities at the end of the 8th century BCE, other than Judah. All we know is that Jews were in Jerusalem. We don't know what's going on in other places, in Babylonia and further east. We just don't know. What we do know is the Jews were scattered all over the place.
Well, and also Mykonos could also have been because a trading post. So, because presumably at all times Jews were trading along the Mediterranean, and so
I think there were significant Jewish trading posts during, theoretically all the way back in the time of Solomon. But we don't really know what those qualify as. We do know that there were some trading going on. Religiously, it seems that things were different. By the time we get down to Alexander, Jews are all over the place. That's what we know. We don't really know earlier than that.
And some would interpret this also in messianic terms, right?
Oh, definitely. This is the return to Israel, right? I mean, this is the ingathering of the exiles. So for sure. Okay, I'm going to take a minute. I'll be right back. We'll get ready for services here.
Okay, I'm going to keep my coffee. I'll get the rest of my coffee. I'll be right.
Okay.
How are you doing, Jody?
Oh, pretty good. I have a stuffed nose, so
My
I
nose
think
was
it's
going
allergies.
yesterday. Maybe something in the air.
Yeah, I think it's allergies.
I'll be right back. I'm back. Oh, can't believe it's already the high holiday season. It's like this year's gone so slowly and so fast at the same time. Are you going to do slichot tonight, Jody? You need to unmute.
Yes.
Yeah, me too.
Yeah.
Got to get more into the high holiday frame of mind.
Yeah. I need to hear a shofar blow. Then I'll know it's getting back to some kind of normalcy.
Yeah. It's going to be weird to be just watching this service at home.
Yeah.
That's just, it's going to be odd.
Hopefully it's nice weather on Sunday because we do those.
We'll cover a
memorial
vote.
services.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Woodland at noon, and then Glendale at 1. And Woodland will have, just a small group, and we won't have the amplified sound system. But I don't think we're going to need to be as spread out there for the service. Glendale will be more, have more people. So.
I hope there are no funerals scheduled for around that time.
Well, there won't be in the Jewish cemetery. So that's I don't think we're going to be loud enough that we'll be disrupting people who aren't in the Jewish cemetery. But in the, our sound system is loud enough probably to cover, about an acre or so, maybe a little more than that. Anything more than that, I don't think people would even hear what we're doing. The last few years, we've been more like 25 or 30 people there. I think in the past, we've been up at 50. I wouldn't be surprised if we're closer to 50 this year, because I think some people are going to come just to be there. But we'll see. It could also be that some people who would normally come won't come, so we'll see what we end up with. I don't know. We have shofar calls on the recordings, but the big shofar service will be live. So for Tashlich.
Will there be sign if we're not going where we normally go? Will there be signs or anything to direct us to where we want to go?
Yeah, we can try. I think it's just going to be a little further in. I have to go look this week and figure out exactly where it'll be, and then we'll send out a note.
Okay.
My guess is we're probably going to be a little bit further down, maybe behind the building, behind the wildlife center or whatever it's called, the nature center, because there's the peninsula that goes out into the water, and there's a good field area there. It's a bigger area, but it's still accessible. It's not
You have to tell us where to park and
Yeah.
to get there.
I mean, there's a lot of parking, to be honest. There's a lot of parking right there. So,
But I mean, I can't picture what you're describing.
okay. Yeah. We'll, we'll,
And I'm not the only one, I'm sure.
yeah, we'll work on that. Um, so tonight we're going to see how well streaming this video on Zoom works, and if it doesn't work, I will tell everybody. Well, I'll post the link, and we'll all watch it separately on YouTube, and then come back and talk about it. So I may do it both anyway, because I'll post the link just in case people would rather watch it directly instead of watching it through Zoom, because I think for some people it's going to be easier to do that anyway. So then everybody will be able to watch it however they want to watch it, and then we'll be able to come back and watch it on and have the discussion and then the service.
And you can do that through screen share, right?
Yeah, I mean, I'm going to do it through screen share, but there are sometimes there are problems streaming through streaming video through Zoom, and then some people will have problems on their own end. So either way, I'll post the link in the chat, and then you can, if you want to just watch it straight on YouTube, or even watch it later, you can do that. I'll post the link on Facebook too. If you want to watch this later, you could watch it here. It's an interesting presentation. It's a presentation done in 2012 by a PhD student. So there's some interesting things that are online, that have been around a while. It's not everything doesn't need to be new. So
Yeah.
And I don't know. We're getting into an interesting time period. It's going to be interesting to see how everybody reacts to all of our stuff here.
Well, we've already had our distance seders, so
Yeah, I mean, I think people are used to it, and everything is gonna just be so different. There are a lot of congregations that are trying to do services as if everybody's in the sanctuary, and then they're recording them, and that I think is going to be really awkward. But because you're not.
kind of like the fake fan cheers at ballparks.
Yes, of course, the fan cheers are comforting, right? I mean, it's like you could kind of imagine that you're there, and I think that's going to be the reality for services too. We're doing it so that a lot of the music stuff is going to be in the sanctuary. I'm speaking from the chapel, and then we have other people who are speaking from their homes. So it'll be interesting to see how ours is going to be more like a TV program and less just like a streamed service. So we'll see how it works, but I think it'll be nice. Okay, time for services. So Shabbat Shalom, everyone. We are going to begin today on page 70 with Hine Matov. Hine Matovu Manayim Shevet Achim Gam Yachad. Hine Matovu Manayim Shevet Achim Gam Yachad. Hine Matov Shevet Achim Gam Yachad. Hine Matov Shevet Achim Gam Yachad. Hine Matovu Manayim Shevet Achim Gam Yachad. Hine Matovu Manayim Shevet Achim Gam Yachad. Okay, now we'll continue On 88 with Elu Devarim. Elu Devarim Sha'en Lahem Shiur Shadam Ochel Perel Techem Be'olam Hazeh V'keren Kayemet Lo Le'olam Haba Ve'eluchein Kibud Avaim Ugmilut Hasadin Bashkamat Beit HaMidrash Shacharit Ve'aravit Ve'haknasat Orchim Uvikur Olim Vaknasat Kala Ulvayat Hamed Viun Tefillah Ve'havat Shalom Ben Adam Lavero Talmud Torah Get Neged Kulam. These are things that are limitless, of which a person enjoys the fruit of the world, while the principle remains in the world to come. They are honoring one's father and mother, engaging in deeds of compassion, arriving early for study, morning and evening, dealing graciously with guests, visiting the sick, providing for the wedding couple, accompanying the dead for burial, being devoted in prayer, and making peace among people. But the study of Torah encompasses them all. Okay, and now we'll continue on 106. The Reader's Kaddish, please rise. Yit gadal v'yit kadash shamei rabbah ve'almadi v'rach irute ve'amlich malchute v'chayechon uvyomechon uvayeda kol beit Yisrael Bagala, Bagala, Ubizman Kariv, Bimeru, Amen. Yahesh Merabba Mevarach, Ayalam Alal Me'amaya, Yitbarach, Vishtabach, Vit par vit romam vit nase vit hada vit ale vit halal shemeda kudesha brichu ve'la min kol berchata v'shirata tush berchata v'nechemata damiran be'alma Bimeru, Amen. Baruch et Adonai HaMevorach. Baruch Adonai HaMevorach Le'olam Va'ed. And now on 110. Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam yotzer or uvorei hoshech osei shalom uvorei et hakol hameir laaretz veladarim alecha barachamim uvtuvo mechadesh b'chol yom tamid maaseh v'reshit ma rabu maasecha Adonai kulam b'chochma asita malah haaretz kinyanecha Titbarach Adonai Eloheinu al shebach maaseh yadecha ve'al me'ore or shasita yafarucha selah or chadash al Tzion ta'ir v'niskeh hulanu mehera le'oro Baruch atah Adonai yotzer hame'orot. Praised are you, Adonai, our God, sovereign of the universe, creator of light and darkness, who makes peace and fashions all things. In mercy you illumine the world and those who live upon it. In your goodness you daily renew creation. How numerous are your works, Adonai! In wisdom you form them all, filling the whole earth with your creatures. Be praised, Adonai our God, for the excellent work of your hands and for the lights you created. May they glorify you. Shine a new light upon Zion, that we may all swiftly merit its radiance. Praised are you, Adonai, creator of all heavenly lights. Baruch atah Adonai yotzer hamaorot. And now on 113. Once or twice in a lifetime, a man or woman may choose a radical leaving, having heard Lech Lecha, go forth. God disturbs us toward our destiny by hard events and by freedom's now urgent voice, which explode and confirm who we are. We don't like leaving, but God loves becoming. Baruch atah Adonai habocher ba'amo Yisrael be'ahava. Shema Yisrael Adonai Eloheinu Adonai Echad. Baruch Shem Kevod Malhuto Leolam Vaed. You may be seated. I need a drink of water here. Or coffee, as the case may be. And we're on 116. Ve'ahavta et Adonai Elohecha b'chol levavcha v'chol nafshecha v'chol meodecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'eleh asher anochi metzabecha hayom alevavecha Veshinantam levanecha, vedibarta bam, veshiftecha b'veitecha, uvlechtecha vaderech, ushochbecha uvkumecha, ukshartam leod ayadecha, v'hayu letotafot beinenecha, uktavtam, al mezuzot beitecha uvisharecha leman tizkeru vasitem et kol mitzvotai vitem kedoshim lelohechem ani Adonai Elohechem asher hotzeiti etchem me'eretz Mitzrayim Hiyot lachem l'Elohim, ani Adonai Elohechem. You shall love Adonai your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your might. Take to heart these instructions with which I charge you this day. Impress them upon your children. Recite them when you stay at home and when you are away, when you lie down and when you get up. Bind them as a sign on your hand, and let them serve as a symbol on your forehead. Inscribe them on the doorposts of your house and on your gates. Thus you shall remember to observe all my commandments and to be holy to your God. I am Adonai your God, who brought you out of the land of Egypt to be your God. I am Adonai your God. Okay, and now we'll continue on 122 with Mi Chamocha. Mi chamocha b'elim Adonai, mi chamocha nedar b'kodesh, norati lo osef eleh, norati lo osef eleh. Shira hadasha shibachu geulim l'shimcha asfat hayam yachad kulam hodu v'himlachu ve'amru Adonai Imloch Leolam Vaed. Yabba ba bim bim bam, yabba ba ba bim bam, yabba ba bim bim bam, yabba ba ba bim bam. Ay 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 ay, yabba ba ba bim bam. Ay 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 ay, yabba ba ba bim bam. Sur Yisrael, Kuma be'ezrat Yisrael, Nuftechenu mecha, Yehuda ve'Yisrael, Go aleinu Adonai Tzevot Shemo, Kedosh Yisrael, Baruch atah Adonai, Yal Yisrael. We now continue on 124 with Tefillah. Please rise. Adonai sefatai tiftachu fi agita ilatecha. Adonai, open up my lips, that my mouth may declare your praise. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu, Elohei Avotenu v'Imotenu, Elohei Avraham, Elohei Yitzhak, Elohei Yaakov, Elohei Sarah, Elohei Rivka, Elohei Leah, Elohei Rachel, Ha'el Agadol Agibor Vanora, El Elyon, Gomel Asadim Tovim, Vekonei Hakol, Vezocher Aste Avot V'Imahot, Umevi Gula Livnei V'Nehem, Leman Shemo Be'achava, Melech Ozer Moshiach U'Magen, Baruch atah Adonai, Magen Avraham, Vezrat Sarah. Atah Gibor Le'olam Adonai, Mechayeh Kol atah Rab Lehoshia, Mechakel Hayim Behesed, Mechayeh Kol Berachamim Rabim, Somech Noflim Berofei Holim, O Matir Asurim, O Mekayem Emunato Lishene Apa Mika Mocha Val Gevurot Umido Melach Melech Memit Umechaye Umatzmiach Yeshua Ne'aman Atalach Chayot HaKol Baruch atah Adonai, Mechayeh HaKol. Nekadesh et Shimcha ba'olam, Keshem shemakdishim oto bishmei marom, Kakatuv al yad nevi'echa, Dekarazel ze ve'amar, Kadosh, 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 Adonai Tzevaot, Meloch Kol Haaretz, Kevodo. Adir, Adirenu, Adonai, Adonenu, Madir, Shimcha b'chol haaretz, Baruch Kevod Adonai, Mimkomo. Echad hu Eloheinu, hu Avinu hu Malkeinu, hu Moshienu vehu Yashmienu, v'rachamav le'nei kol hai. Ani Adonai Elohechem, Yimloch Adonai leolam, Elohai Yitzion, ledor vador. Hallelujah. Ledor vador nagid God lecha, Your netzach netzachim kedushatcha nakdish. V'shifcha Eloheinu mipinu lo yamush leolam va'ed. Baruch atah Adonai ha'el hakadosh. Okay, you may be seated. I get a quick drink here. Okay, and we're at the top of page 133. We're a people in whom the past endures, in whom the present is inconceivable, without moments gone by. The Exodus lasted a moment enduring forever. What happened once upon a time happens all the time. Okay, now we'll read at the top of 135. We offer thanks, O God, for this Shabbat, which unites us in faith and hope, for Shabbat holiness, which inspires sacred living, for Shabbat memories glowing even in darkness, for Shabbat peace born of friendship and love. We offer thanks and blessing, O God. Baruch atah Adonai mekadesh ha-Shabbat. And now on 137, top of the page. Ever-present one, may we, your people Israel, be worthy in our deeds and our prayer, wherever we live, wherever we seek you, in this land and Zion restored, in all lands. You are our God, whom alone we serve in reverence. Baruch atah Adonai she'otecha levadecha b'yirah na'avo. Okay, and now on page 139, we'll go around our room here and we'll go Sally, Jody, and Steve. Okay, Sally first.
For the expanding grandeur of creation, worlds known and unknown, galaxies beyond galaxies, filling us with awe and challenging our imaginations. Modim anachnu lach.
For this fragile planet Earth, its times and tides, its sunsets and seasons. Modim anachnu lach.
For the joy of human life, its wonders and surprises, its hopes and achievements. Modim anachnu lach.
Our human community, our common past and future hope, our oneness transcending all separation, our capacity to work for peace and justice in the midst of hostility and oppression. Modim anachnu lach.
For high hopes and noble causes, for faith without fanaticism, for understanding of views not shared. Modim anachnu lach.
For all who have labored and suffered for a fairer world, who have lived so that others might live in dignity and freedom. Modim anachnu lach.
For human liberties and sacred rights, for opportunities to change and grow, to affirm and choose. Modim anachnu lach.
We pray that we may live not by our fears, but by our hopes, not by our words, but by our deeds. Blessed are you, Adonai. Your name is goodness, and you are worthy of thanksgiving. Baruch atah Adonai, hatov shimcha ulecha na'eh l'chodah. Sim, 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 shalom, sim, 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 shalom, sim, sim. Sim shalom tova uveracha. Sim, sim, sim shalom, sim, sim, sim shalom, sim, sim, Osim shalom tova uveracha. At this point in our service, we'll pause to think of all of those among our family and friends who are ill or in need of healing. We think of all of those in our congregation and community who are battling coronavirus, all those around our state and our country as well. We think of all of those who are working in healthcare of any sort, helping to keep people healthy, helping to keep us healthy. We think of all of those who are out there working, providing us food and safety and entertainment and any number of other things. And I'd ask if people would like to mention the names of those they're thinking about specifically today. Would I like to mention the name of anyone?
Rebecca Schaefer, Bailey Weinstein.
Okay. As we think of all of those who are ill, we'll sing Mishabera. Mishabera. Habracha Neimotenu. May the source of strength, who blessed the ones before us, help us find the courage to make our lives a blessing, and let us say, Amen. Mishavera imotenu mekor habracha leavotenu. Bless those in need of healing with refuah shlema, the renewal of body, the renewal of spirit, and let us say, Amen. We now pause for a few moments of personal prayer and silent meditation. Okay, and now we'll continue with Aleinu on page 282. Please rise. Aleinu leshabeach ladon hakol, latet gedula leotzer breshit, shehunot hashemayim ve'osed haaretz, umoshav yikaro b'shamayim mima'al. Ushkina tuzo begov he meromim, hu Eloheinu eino, v'anachnu korim, u'mishtachavim u'modim, lifnei melech malchei amlachim, hakadosh baruch hu. V'ne'emar v'haya Adonai l'melech al kol haaretz v'yom hahu yeh Adonai echad u'shemo Ushemo echad. And now at the top of 291. It is hard to sing of oneness when the world is not complete, when those who once brought wholeness to our life have gone, and naught but memory can fill the emptiness their passing leaves behind. But memory can tell us only what we were in company with those we loved. It cannot help us find each of us what each of us alone must now become. Yet no one is really alone. Those who live no more echo still within our thoughts and words, and what they did is part of what we have become. We do best homage to our dead when we live our lives more fully, even in the shadow of our loss. For each of our lives is worth the life of the whole world. In each one is the breath of the ultimate one. In affirming the one, we affirm the worth of each one, whose life now ended brought us closer to the source of life, in whose unity no one is alone and every life finds purpose. Our thoughts turn to those who have departed this earth, our own loved ones, those whom our friends and neighbors have lost, the martyrs of our people whose graves are unmarked, and those of every race and nation whose lives have been a blessing to humanity. As we remember them, we meditate on the meaning of love and loss, of life and death. Today, we mark the art sites of Adeline Abramson, Samuel Bobb, Gertrude Brody, Mose Cohen, Norma Cranberg, Bob Elsner, Jack Finkelstein, Jerry Gruen, Jacob Joseph, Millie Kaufman, Honora Levine, Eugene Mannheimer, Mike Masters, David Miller, David Morgenstern, Dr. Maurice Noun, Samuel Pigeon, Abraham Robinson and Hyman Robinson, Ilsa Rosenthal, Carol Rubiner, Leonard Salonikio, Abraham Schurman, Charlotte Solar, Sylvia Turan, and Morris Woods. We mark the recent passings of Sanford Nadich, Alice Bishop, and Jackie Strom Sinickin. Are there other names we should mention for Kaddish today? Okay. As we think of all of them, we'll recite Mourner's Kaddish together on page 294. Yit gadal v'yit kadash shemei rabbah, v'almad ivra hirutei v'yamlich malchutei, v'chayechon uv'yomechon ufayed kol beit Yisrael, b'gala v'zman kariv v'imru amen. Yehei shmei rabbah mevarach le'olam v'l'olmei almaya, yitbarach v'yishtabach v'yitpa'ar v'yitromam v'yitnaseh, Viet Hadar, Viet Ale, Viet Halal, Shemei de Kudisha Barichu. Le'ela min kol birchata v'shirata, tushbachata v'nechamata, damiran be'alma v'imru amen. Yehe shlama rabba min shemaya, v'chayim aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. Osei shalom bimromav, hu ya'asei shalom. Aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen. May the source of peace send peace to all who mourn and comfort to all who are bereaved. And let us say, amen. Osei shalom bimromav, hu yaseh shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael ve'imru amen. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu ve'al kol Yisrael. Yaseh shalom, Yaseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisrael. May the coming week be a week that sees shalom increase in our world. May it be a week of time spent with family and friends, either in person or online. May we have a wonderful beginning of the High Holy Day period, and with a period of Heshbon Nefesh, an accounting of the soul, and may it be a meaningful one for all of us. And let us say, Amen. Shabbat Shalom and Shana Tova.
Shabbat Shalom. See you tonight.
And we'll see you tonight. Slichot is, so we're going to watch the video at 7. The discussion will follow 8-ish, 8:10-ish. And then Slichot services will be at 8:30. I'll post all of that on Facebook too, so you can see it. But I don't know if Facebook Live is going to work because it didn't work this morning. So we'll have to see. But we will do whatever we need to do. So anyway, have a good day. Shabbat Shalom, everybody.
See you later.